Getting access to clean drinking water is often a major challenge, particularly in remote areas of the continent. This is a challenge Cirrus Water Management has turned into a viable business by developing technology to tap high-quality water from the atmosphere. In studio with us to tell us how all of this works is Bruce Jones. He's a commercial director at Cirrus Water Management. Bruce, thanks for your time. Getting water from the atmosphere, clean water. How does this app work or this technology work?
Tumusha, thanks for having me on the show. What we do is, well, first of all, high quality drinking water comes from mostly bottled water, and a lot of the time the bottled water uses unsustainable sources. Whereas in the atmosphere there's always a source of water vapor. There's always water vapor in the air, even in Johannesburg on a winter's day.
Really? I would think with all the pollution, I don't know, I heard of acid rain. How do you separate the good and the bad water?
What we do is we have a machine that sucks in air out of the atmosphere. And with that water vapor that's always in the air, what we do is we cool the air down to just below the dew point. The dew point is the point at which water vapor condenses into the liquid form or water. Mm-hmm. What we do is that once the water is condensed, it drops out the bottom of our machines, gets stored, and then goes through a very simple filtration process. We then pump it to where it's needed, which is typically into water coolers in an office environment, or kettles, urns, or even a very small bottling plant.
So what are the costs involved here? If you think of the unsustainable ways that you alluded to earlier, and I'd like to get a bit more a clearer picture on what you mean by that versus what you do and the costs there.
All right. What we do is there's obviously the capital cost of the machinery and then the operating costs as well. But we're lucky to have the support of one of the larger financial institutions, in which case you would be paying around about just over R2 per litre. Now, if you compare some of the bottled waters, the cheapest you're going to get pay for bottled water is around about R2 a litre, going up to anywhere to R20 a litre. In fact, I was at a restaurant the other day where I paid R30.
Or if you're at the movies, it's around that amount too.
Correct. Yeah. So that is where we come in a lot cheaper. And once you've paid off your machinery, that cost drops to just over 70 cents a litre, which is a very small fraction of what other comparable quality bottled water costs.
So this is a machine that you can keep in your home, or is this just for purely industrial use?
It's a combination. We typically target the larger industrials of companies that are working remotely and don't have access to municipal water and municipal infrastructures, or that could include mining exploration companies, but also remote lodges, bush lodges and island lodges as well. We also provide that for domestic use in houses, in which case you'd be totally off the grid by not relying on broken or failing infrastructure and making sure that your family is kept healthy.
Interesting, this conversation of going off the grid. There's electricity, now there's water. Just another aspect though that I'd really like for us to touch on. How do you basically, how's the uptake been in terms of people who've been using it now? Is it a relatively new concept here in South Africa? Just give us.
In South Africa, it's a relatively new concept. We are just breaking into the market, but where we have broken in, people love our technology. It means that they, as I said earlier, are off the grid and they have a constant and a high quality supply of drinking water. So the uptake has been good.
And competitors in the market, who else is doing this?
There's nobody locally that is doing it. There are overseas companies that manufacture, but nobody locally manufactures and supports the products like we do. We've designed the product specifically for these conditions, and we support it locally as well, and into the rest of Southern Africa.
So you mentioned that there are costs involved. Initially, you would have a capital outlay. Just overall costs, if I was now thinking that I've got a bush lodge somewhere, how much is this going to set me back by?
Well, as I said, you can finance it, in which case it just stays in your operating expenses at R2 a litre to begin with. Or if you do want to buy a machine, our 100 litre a day module costs in the region of R130,000.
Bruce, thank you so much. Interesting things. You can get clean water from the atmosphere after all and get off the grid. Thanks so much to Bruce Jones. He's a commercial director at Cirrus Water Management.